All right, thanks everybody for joining us today. You're here for Prodoscore's webinar on how to cut employee attrition by 50% by embracing a work from home policy. My name's Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Marketing for Prodoscore. We have with us today Denise Hazim from Viwo. Viwo is a subsidiary of Gatehouse Media, a publicly traded company. And we have Denise here with us because Viwo has adopted a work from home policy. So Denise is going to share some of the success stories and reasons why they've adopted that policy to give us an additional piece of information beyond the study that we're going to be talking about, and tell her story of how they've managed to be successful in adopting it, including some of the technologies that they've used in order to be able to be successful with a work from home policy. So the debate's been raging for decades about whether working from home makes workers happier, more productive, leads to them sticking around longer with a company, being more loyal. And so why is that debate raged for so long, and why is there no agreement on it? The primary problem is trying to do anything that's scientifically sound to measure this is really, really difficult. And so that's where the study that came out from a Stanford professor is so important, because he had an opportunity to do a really scientifically rigorous study on whether working from home led to happier employees, greater productivity, less attrition across your employee base. And so what he did is he had an opportunity through one of his grad students to work with C-Trip, a Chinese company, and they had 250 people all doing the exact same job for the same company. And so they got C-Trip to agree to have half of the employees work from home and half come into the office every day for 9 months. They closely tracked all of the things that they were doing, their productivity, tried to measure happiness, looked at attrition, people that left from the two different teams. And so, like I said, they tracked all of this for 9 months, and then they employed everything. A lot of the people that volunteered for the study were the youngest in the company. So these would be millennials that most companies are trying really hard to be able to attract and competing for talent on. And whenever I share out the link to the deck, there's a link to the study right here in the deck that you can click through on to be able to look at that if you want to. So what did the study find? The study found that working from home makes you happier and more efficient. So some conclusions from the study: C-Trip saved about $2,000 per year per employee in office space. So this is a big cost that companies have in, where do we put these new employees that we're hiring? So office space cost is, oftentimes a cost that, people just assume is a part of doing business. But it's a big cost savings if you adopt a work from home policy. The employees that work from home were on average 13.5% more efficient than those who worked in the office. And work at home employees were 9% more engaged in their work than their coworkers. So that's a measurement of the percent of time each hour they were actually logged into the company's call tracking system doing their jobs. And so I failed to mention, most of these people were doing call center activities. So what they were doing on a day-to-day basis was very trackable. They were able to see, how much time they were spending on the phone, how many connections and conversations they were having. And so they had tools in place to be able to actually actively measure this and be able to look at, across the entire team, whether they were at home or in the office, what were they doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's going to be a big piece of what Denise is going to talk about, are the technologies that are available and that Viwo is using to be able to effectively adopt a work from home policy and be able to measure the results for that team. Some other conclusions that came from it: the work from home employees reported shorter breaks and fewer sick days. They took less time off. And then this is the big one, obviously, from the title of the webinar. Attrition rates were 50% better with the work at home employees. Anybody that's managed a call center or a outbound sales team knows that attrition is a huge, huge problem. And, attrition is, both a staffing problem, but also is a huge expense, because as you have, people leave, you have to hire new people, you have to train them, you have a period of time that they ramp to get up to speed. If there's somebody that's not going to fit or perform, it takes time for you to be able to get to that conclusion, to figure out that, hey, this person's not going to work out. And so then you've got lost productivity over that entire period of time. And so attrition is a enormous, oftentimes hidden cost that companies have to deal with. And then the last point is, while it's hard to measure happiness quantifiably, the employees who worked at home reported much higher job satisfaction. So those are the conclusions from the study. And like I said, this has been pretty remarkable to have an opportunity to have a large sample size, of 125 people for each sample, and be able to systematically, and have the technology in place to actually measure what these people are doing on a daily basis and actually see what's going on, and be able to actually come to some hard conclusions on it, as opposed to all of the studies that debate has raged around, where there were questions about how they were identifying what they were studying, how were you identifying how productive people were, how big was your sample size. Sample size has been a huge problem, because most of those studies are relatively small, because they've been awfully labor intensive to be able to gather the data and make the comparisons. So again, there's a link to the study in the deck that I'll be sending out. I encourage you to actually read through it. But pretty remarkable conclusions that show pretty definitively that working from home is more productive and is more effective. There are some big caveats for that, and we'll talk through those. But it's got to be the right people. Some people are more productive working in the office. I in fact, am one of those. I'm much more productive if I come in the office, and so it's not the right fit for everybody, but overall, and for much of the population, especially for those that prefer to work from home, you don't have to worry about them being less productive. In fact, you should see a productivity gain. You've got cost savings on the office front, and you've got less attrition and happier employees. So, Denise, I think this is a good opportunity for you to talk about some of the experiences that Viwo's had in adopting their work from home policy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Jason, for having me on today. Viwo adopted Prodoscore early in 2017, and I think a lot of the things that you said really resonated with how Viwo was able to decrease attrition rates and also increase productivity across our workforce. I think some things to remember is, right now as companies grow, we are targeting more of the millennial workforce. And one of the things that, we're able to offer is the work from home strategy, right? And this can sometimes be in lieu of, a higher pay rate, et cetera. We're also able to hire employees anywhere in the US. We're based in Los Angeles, and I'm sure everybody knows Los Angeles, the rent is very expensive, and also the commute in Los Angeles is very tedious. There's also a higher cost of living here. So, if I was going to hire a salesperson, I would probably have to be in the 6 digits in order to hire a really good salesperson. But with a tool like Prodoscore, I'm able to hire someone who's just as qualified, but in a different part of the US for probably half the cost, rather than hiring somebody in LA for double the cost. So we've really seen a lot of benefits in that sense, where we're able to hire people all across the US. But we're also able to give employees some leniency. We have an employee who just had a baby, and if she wasn't able to work from home, she would probably be out for a longer period or may not have returned to work because of the restraints of having a newborn, et cetera. So she's coming back to work and she's ready to go because she has that ability to work from home. So we're helping improve the quality of life. But again, like you said, there are some caveats. There's some employees that don't work better from home. They work better in an office space. So we've seen a little bit of that as well. But again, I think the benefits for us have outweighed the negative things. So we've really been able to improve productivity, see an improvement in productivity, and also have employees who are happier because they have that leniency of being able to work from home, either full-time or part-time.
Thanks, Denise. And specific to this webinar, what have you guys been able to measure as far as VIWO's attrition rate? So I know that PayScale, for instance, has said that the average tenure of an employee is currently 3 years. What is that average tenure for you guys at VIWO?
For Bio, it's 5 years.
Okay, so that's
And
significant. That's nearly that's a
yeah,
40% difference. Um, so yeah,
correct.
that's great. That your guys' experience definitely backs up what they found here in the study. Um, great. So one big piece of this, and so this is where we'll kind of make a segue into the technology part of it, is visibility is a huge part of being able to successfully adopt a work from home policy. So increased visibility rewards remote workers and vice versa. Remote workers that don't have visibility into what they're doing, can suffer because of that, or at a minimum are oftentimes concerned that they're not going to be recognized for what they're doing. And so you see this in the study. Some of the employees returned to the office after the study was completed, primarily because they were worried about their work being acknowledged. And this is where in the study, technology was crucial. Like I said, these were people that were working primarily in call center functions, and so being able to have a technology platform where they could actually see what the people were doing on a day-to-day basis and how productive they were, was key to being able to adopt and work with that work from home policy. And that's one of the big pieces of where Prodoscore comes in. So Prodoscore allows you to be able to look at productivity across your entire team, no matter where they are, be able to see exactly how productive they are, what they're doing, and then also be proactive about engaging with those employees. So you can find your really high performing employees and go in and see what's driving that performance. Why are they so much more productive, and then learn lessons from that that you can then apply across the rest of the team. Or vice versa, you can find problem spots and identify those ahead of time and be proactive about finding opportunities for coaching or training or trying to work on their workflow on a day-to-day basis, or how they're actually doing their job, and be more hands-on and help them be productive, as opposed to waiting for things to get so bad that you have to make a decision to let them go. So like they've missed quota for 2 quarters or whatever, and so not only do you have to make a decision to let them go and find a replacement, but you've missed 2 quarters of productivity while that person was underperforming. Um, so what is Prodoscore? So Prodoscore uses machine learning and natural language processing and plugs into all of your different platforms that your employees are using on a daily basis. So that's things like G Suite, so Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Docs, being able to plug into your CRM like Salesforce or Sugar or Zoho, being able to plug into VoIP phone systems like Vonage or Ring Central, so that you can actually see when people are having conversations on the phone, or conference call systems. And so it breaks down all of those silos of your different cloud platforms, that are really crucial to being able to successfully adopt a work from home policy anyway, because you need to have people be able to work remotely and be productive and be collaborative. And so adoption of cloud technologies is essential for successfully being able to do that. But Prodoscore breaks down the silos of data that you have in all of those different systems that your employees are working in on a day-to-day basis. It allows you to be able to see exactly what their day looks like, no matter which one of those platforms they're in and what they're doing. And then, instead of actually having to struggle with the problem of, okay, how do I gather all this data into one place, and how do I weight what different activities are and stuff like that? And try and figure out what in the world's going on, by employing and using Google's machine learning. Prodoscore sucks in all of that data from all of those different systems and all of those different activities, and is able to look at that and say, that person in that role under that manager at that type of company, productivity looks like this, and then spits out a single productivity score for them. And so with that, we're going to hand it over to Denise, and she's going to show us some of the ways that they're using Prodoscore at BIWO to be able to drive their work from home policy and be successful with it.
Wonderful. So this is the Prodoscore dashboard. And here you can see right when you log into Prodoscore, obviously there's a score on top. And here you can see the date range. So you can adjust this to view whatever date range you really want to view and get an insight into. So here you'll see there's 6 employees who are above average. There's 8 employees who are average, and there's 2 that are below average. As you scroll down the dashboard, you can see here it shows a week over week productivity and if it's increasing or decreasing. And as you scroll down, you'll see again further distinction between the different scores and the different groups within the organization. And then here you have the correlation topics, which gives you insight into what is actually being discussed across the organization. On the left is really the, I guess, the most important nav bar. You'll see here there's different drop downs where you can see the different managers. In the employee section, you can see the different departments. So if you click on the managers tab, you'll see the different managers have different colored bars, so you can see the productivity of the different groups. If you click on one of them, it'll show you the manager, it'll show you the different people that report to that person and their productivity scores, and if they're increasing or decreasing. And obviously Saturday and Sunday are not measured, so that's why these 2 are grayed out. So again, it gives you, if you want to just look at different departments or just different managers, you can do that by looking at this right here. The employees tab, I find this very useful because if I want to look at different departments, look at their productivity, I can do that. Or if I want to look at all the employees as a whole, I can do that. I can see their name, their role, their manager name, their score, and if it's increasing or decreasing. So it's very easy to navigate and understand what's going on in the organization as a whole. I want to show you an employee who has a really good Prodoscore and performs fairly well when it comes to Prodoscore. And again, Prodoscore again is taking all this information that exists within the different tools that we use, like G Suite, our VoIP system, and our CRM, and it gives us a score on their productivity. And it always compares like worker to like worker. So Joey would be, his score would be based in the sales department because he's in the sales department. And we look at his performance based on some of the other people in the sales department. And you can see here the different components that it ties in. So here's the 1 week overview. And it always compares the current 7 days that you're looking at with the previous 7 days that you're looking at. So you can see if their productivity is pretty consistent or if it's increasing or decreasing. Now, this employee works from home 100% of the time. So he's able to, save time for driving into an office. I'm able to save time from, I'm able to save money from having to rent a larger space at the office for employees like this, who have the ability and do well working from home. So you can see his Google Drive activities, his conference calling. Here are some CRM activities, his emails, his chats, and his phone system. And then as you scroll down, you can see his daily timeline and his work productivity. So, is he working all day long or is he flatlining anywhere, etc. So here you can see, at about 5:30, he stops work. So it's flatline, and he starts work, looks at about just ahead of 8 o'clock. But down here, I can actually see what he was doing during that day that led to his productivity score. So I can see, when he makes his phone calls, when does he send his emails, when does he schedule a lot of his conference calls for, etc. So it gives me insight into how this person is working. If he's one of my top performers, I want that insight. I want to know how he's working and what activities he's doing so that I can share that with some of the other team members to get their score increased. But it also helps with onboarding new employees. So when I bring on a new employee, I know what activities he needs to be doing in order to attain this high score and ultimately hit the goals that I've set for them. So you can see here, all the different activities. But if you actually click on any of these, it does dig in deeper, so you can actually see what kind of emails he's sending. You can see what time he's sending his emails, and then you can see some content of the emails if you click on one of these, which is great because I can see that he's communicating about work, discussing different topics, etc. There is a cool section here called correlations, which actually tells me what this employee is talking about. So what are his top topics in his conversations via email, phone, chat, etc. And then here are the people that he in these 7 days has corresponded with the most. So it gives me insight into what Joey is doing. If I wanted an overall company insight, I can click into this correlations and see what the overall organization is talking about and if they're on topic. So for us, we're very sales focused. So there are different initiatives or sales campaigns that we launch. So I want to know if those employees are talking about those sales campaigns. And if they're not, that will lead me to believe that they either don't understand the campaign or they need more training. And we actually had that happen with us last year, where we launched a campaign and employees were not talking about that product. And when I asked them, they said they were, but then when I looked in Prodoscore, I saw that they weren't. And so I addressed it, and it turned out that they did need more training. They were just sort of scared or embarrassed to ask for more training. So we changed that up, and then we saw the success of that product offering even more. So I showed you Joey, who does a great job working from home. He seems like he's, has a great work ethic, even if he's from home. Here's another employee who actually works from home on Fridays. And you can see that this past Friday, his score is very low. And you can look at his activity. His activity was also very low. So again, some employees do a better job working from home. Some employees are just better fit to work in an office environment. But we have seen where, employees are less distracted. Some of them work from home and they are less distracted when they're working from home. And that's better for us because we don't have that time that's wasted. Here's another employee that works at home on Wednesdays, and his score is lower on Wednesdays. So the majority of time he does work in the office because he just performs better in the office space. Maybe it's because of having the support of his peers, or he has less distractions. But again, I have employees that, both like to work from home full time and that work from the office full time. Here's an employee that works from home full time, and you can see his productivity is always pretty high. He has a lot of phone time. He has a lot of calendar events. He's doing emails. He's doing CRM. So he probably has a pretty good workspace at home. He does pretty well. You can see he's consistently working throughout the day. And so, he's happy. He's hitting his goals. He's, hitting his bonuses, and he's able to, save on commute time and having to come into an office, because there is a lot associated with having to go into work. I think, commute time, waste of time talking with different employees, and, even eating out and eating lunch, etc., that takes up a lot of time. So we've had a very positive response from our employees, the ones that we've let them work from home. They've been very successful. They have been able to hit their goals and surpass their goals. And we've seen in 2017 a 23% increase in our productivity as a whole, as an organization, because now I'm able to see what they're doing from home, what's working, what's not working, make adjustments, and then give them more tools that they would need to help improve their productivity. I'll click on the correlations piece, and this is the one that I spoke to earlier, where you can actually see the different topics being discussed, and you can see the different contacts outside of the domain, so customers, etc., and how much time is actually being spent, on those customers or on those different topics. Here you can see the different topics that my teams talk about, which ones are the most relevant ones. If I click on it, again, it'll take a second to load, but it'll show me who's talking about those different topics, and then in what context and what format they're communicating about that. And again, we're a sales-led organization, so it's really important that different products are being pushed ahead of other ones, or different campaigns, etc. So you can see here the majority of people who are talking about that topic, and then in what format they're talking about it. Here you can see different people that they're communicating with outside of our organization. If we click here, We can see who's talking to that person, how much time is being spent with that person, and then what content. So really helps us manage the employees, different campaigns, look for loopholes within the organization. Maybe there's too much time being spent on a specific type of employee, etc. So we've been able to make adjustments according to what we've seen in Prodoscore. And then again, ultimately helping our employees to hit their goals, and hit their bonuses, etc., without having to come into an office space all the time, but be able to work and have that leniency to work from home. And like I mentioned earlier, we are looking at bringing on a younger and younger workforce, as we grow, and a lot of them are millennials, and it seems to resonate more with them that they like the flexibility of working from home, or from anywhere outside the office, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be from home. They can be working from a coffee shop or a Panera Bread or whatever. But if they're better and they're more successful doing that, then I'm fine with that, because that makes them happy. They stay longer. I'm not losing employees, and I'm not losing time investing in employees, and getting them up to speed on what's going on. So that's pretty much how Vio has really benefited from the work from home environment, and policy, and obviously retaining our workforce and retaining our employees and having happier employees who have really a better quality of life because of the ability to work from home.
That's great. Denise, can you give me some specific use cases or examples of like where Prodoscore has helped or would have helped the employee attrition problem?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, with our employee that, just had a baby, I think if we weren't able to offer her the work from home flexibility, we probably would have lost her as an employee. And she was really one of our top employees, and it would have been a huge loss in investment in time, and resources to, get her to where she was at. If we had said, nope, you can't work from home, and then having to go out and find another employee, train another employee, get them up and going, that probably would have taken about 9 months.
And didn't you have an employee that had left not long before you started with Prodoscore that we found some interesting information and data on whenever Prodoscore had been onboarded?
Yeah, we actually had an employee that we had lost. He left, and when he left, we were able to see that he actually had stopped working like 3 weeks prior to his exit date. And if we had if we had Prodoscore installed, we probably would have seen that his score had dropped, and would have been able to really offer him more money to stay, because that was really the bottom line, which was, employees leave most of the time because they get a higher offer, somewhere else. And I would have kept that employee because it would have saved me money in having to onboard a new employee and get them trained.
Yeah, and you see that a lot where you may not necessarily know what it is, but if you at least know that their engagement and their productivity is dropping, then
Yep.
you've got that opportunity to have a proactive conversation with them. So it may
Exactly.
be that they got a better offer, and so you may have an opportunity to match that offer, or it may be they're planning on moving and having to relocate, and they just assume that that's not going to be something that's on the table, and they need to be looking for another job.
Right.
And so like
And
you
we've
go
actually been able to have those discussions with some employees, because I look at Prodoscore pretty much all week long, and I get alerts when some scores drop. But when I do my one-on-one calls with some of the employees, I'm able to go, hey, look, looks like your score dropped a little, like what's going on? And they're able to speak more openly with me because they can see that I can look at their productivity, and if they do have a problem, they're able to bring it up without it being so awkward, etc. So I think we have better communication with our employees also because of Prodoscore.
Yeah, and along those lines, can you give some examples where Prodoscore's allowed you to do more proactive coaching and be able to correct a problem before it got out of hand?
Yeah, we actually had an employee that we had brought on. He'd been, with the organization for a while. And when you're a salesperson and you have sales goals, without a tool like Prodoscore, the all the management really gets to see is, hey, are you hitting those goals or you're not hitting those goals that are set for you? And with Prodoscore, I was able to see that, one employee just was not hitting his goals. But when I looked at his Prodoscore, he had a consistently high Prodoscore. He was actually sending a lot of emails, having a lot of phone conversations, but was not able to really hit his goals. And we discovered that he did need more training on really how to close the deal. Right? People like talking to him. They learned a lot from him, but he wasn't able to push that deal over the edge to get it closed. And we're able to train him and get him to where he can close deals and hit his goals. But without something like Prodoscore, I would have just seen that, okay, he's not hitting his goals, he's probably not working, I need to get rid of this employee and bring on somebody else. So really just giving me that insight into, sometimes employees do have a really high Prodoscore, but there's something wrong with the context of what they're saying, etc., or the content of what they're writing, rather than, oh, this is a lazy employee, which was not the case.
Which raises a great point. I mentioned earlier that one of the keys to being able to successfully adopt a work from home policy is having the right technologies in place, and in particular, being able to leverage cloud technologies and cloud platforms has been a huge piece of what's allowed people to be able to successfully adopt work from home policies. But of course, one of the struggles that you have with any number of platforms that you're going to roll out to your employees is, are they actually using those platforms and using them correctly? So, can you talk a little bit about that use case for you guys internally, as far as being able to, determine, uh, are people actually using these platforms the way they should?
Yeah, so we invest a lot in our technologies that we use, and I think everybody probably knows that CRMs are not cheap. VoIP systems are not cheap, and obviously, G Suite is not the cheapest product. But if, for example, with our phones, we were able to install a VoIP system that really allowed for a lot of mobility. And what I discovered is, after we installed Prodoscore, the employees were really turned on to, hey, I need to use this phone and not my cell phone to make work-related phone calls. I called one of my employees, and I would call him always on his cell phone, and every time I call him, he'd say, hey, Denise, let me call you right back. And so I sort of got irritated one day, and I was like, hey, why do you always have to call me back when I call you? And he said, well, you're always calling my personal cell phone line, and Prodoscore doesn't measure that. I need you to call me on my work line. And so, I was really made aware, like, oh wow, they really are paying attention to the different tools and having to use those tools to improve their score. So, for example, with a CRM, I want them to be logging all of the correspondence with customers, et cetera, in the CRM, so that that information is available for everyone. Well, Prodoscore really forces them to do that, because they know that the more that they log into the CRM and add notes and change status, et cetera, the better their score becomes. So again, we've seen a very significant increase in productivity across all the different tools that we use, and just getting them to adopt those tools more, because they're aware that, hey, the more I use Prodoscore, the better my score becomes.
Right. So that's a great segue into, what are some of the key platforms that Perdascore plugs into, and that companies like Viwa are using to enable their work from home policy. So G Suite's a huge one. Google was the original cloud productivity platform. So being able to plug into G Suite, being able to use Gmail, Google Docs, Sheets, Drive, Hangouts, all of the tools that they've built to allow for productivity wherever they are, is crucial, a crucial piece to what Prodoscore is plugging into, and people that are successfully adopting work from home policies are utilizing. And then we mentioned CRM. All of the major CRMs that are currently dominating the space are cloud based. And so, obviously CRMs allow you to be able to, across the organization, no matter where you are, be able to track and monitor what are the actual, relationships and statuses of the accounts and deals and leads that you're working on. And so that's where being able to plug into CRMs like Salesforce and Zoho and Sugar CRM is so key. So you can track exactly what they're doing in the CRM platform as well. And then the last piece was what you were mentioning, the VoIP, so voice over the internet protocol. So solutions like Vonage, where you're able to then deploy a telephony solution out to your employees wherever they are, and allow them to be able to use that, but then also be able to allow you to track and monitor, how much is that being utilized, and how many calls and how much time are they spending on calls. Is so crucial, both from just a general management standpoint, but also being able to plug into that using Prodoscore. So those are really kind of the three core platforms, cloud platforms that Prodoscore plugs into, but also are instrumental in companies being able to successfully adopt work from home policies. So we've got some questions here, I know. Let's go into these. All right, so we have a question. So you can see how this works for teams like sales and support as pretty straightforward. What about teams like engineering and HR? So let's lead with HR. HR in particular is one that can benefit hugely from this. Not only to be able to look at productivity for your HR team, because HR obviously takes a lot of communication out to people. So being able to see how many emails they're sending or phone calls or meetings they're having and stuff like that is crucial to be able to track and be able to look at how productive those members of HR are. But even more importantly, Prodoscore is hugely beneficial for that HR department to be able to look at what's happening as they bring on new employees. So being able to say, hey, we brought this person on, but they seem to be having a problem ramping, and then being able to see exactly what they're doing or where the issues may be with their productivity, and be able to be proactive about that, be able to identify somebody that may have needed some additional training or is having trouble with a certain technology platform or a certain process, and be able to get ahead of those problems. And then also on the turnover side of it, so we talked about being able to identify people that are at risk of churning out as an employee, and being able to get out in front of that. On the engineering side, it's it may be slightly less applicable, but engineers still need to be collaborative and responsive, and they're still sending emails and they're still having conversations with people. And so while it may not as directly reflect what they're spending most of their day doing, like if they're sitting there doing coding all day long, you still want to be able to see, is this person being responsive to people and communicating effectively. On the technical side like that, Denise, have you guys seen use cases on engineering or dev teams?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, we actually have seen an improvement in communication. I mean, I think it's always important for, regardless of the department, they do need to communicate, if not with outside customers, with internal employees. And so, the communication needs to be there. It needs to be using the tools that we're providing to do so. So yeah, I mean, Prodoscore applies for their department as well, because they do need to communicate with all of the other departments in order to keep the flow of business the same.
Cool. All right, and then we had a question: can you block managers from seeing content of emails? So Prodoscore by default shows you just the subject and a snippet of the email. Denise, do you guys use a Prodoscore in a way that blocks that content?
No, but I do know that the ability is there. I actually did check with one of the product managers at Prodoscore, and they do have the ability to block reading of the content of emails, etc. But for us, like you said, Jason, it shows just the first sentence of the email, and I guess we're not really micromanaging in that way. We're looking at really the overall productivity, and really all of the information that Prodoscore is pulling is available in all of these systems if I wanted to go in and look for it. What Prodoscore is really doing is making it easier to compile all that data into one screen where I can just look at one system instead of, where previously I would have to log into the audit log or activity log of the CRM to see, who was in the CRM that day, how many leads did they work on, et cetera. Log into the VoIP system to see how many phone calls did, Joe make and how long was he on these calls for, et cetera. So it just is really compiling. It's not creating any data. It's just compiling the data and making it easier to understand.
Cool. All right, the next question is, how do you roll this out to an organization without scaring people? So, I'll talk to, our experience on the Prodoscore side, and then I'll let Denise talk about, what that was like rolling it out to people at Vilo. But this is, of course, is a question that we get commonly, and it's kind of the big brother question. So, how do you keep, employees from being worried or scared about this type of visibility? One to start with is the exact point that Denise just mentioned. Like, all of this data is already available and accessible to your admins of those different systems. So if somebody wants to go in and find this data about somebody, they can. Prodoscore is allowing your managers to be able to better organize and understand all of the data that's already available to them, and get it all into one place instead of have it siloed in all these different systems. But for the most part, virtually everybody that Prodoscore's worked with thus far, the goal is to be a better manager and to be more productive as a company. And so that's a very, proactive stance to take. That's saying, like, we want to be able to be better managers, and train our employees better and have them be more productive. And so it's not somebody that's wanting to dig in and find out every detail and get people in trouble, because that's not particularly effective management. And so what Prodoscore is doing is allowing you to be able to look across your entire employee, or all of the people that you're responsible for as a manager, and be able to identify both the people that are doing a really good job, so you can try and learn lessons from that and replicate it, and then identify people that may need some additional help and help figure out ways to make them more productive. And so that's actually a much better strategy and way of going about it than just turning somebody loose and then saying we're going to have a 60 or 90-day review, and then they've got to worry at that time, even if they needed extra training, or something was broken or not working effectively or whatever. By the time it gets to the point of actually reviewing anything and going in and digging into like why they didn't perform, the ship's largely sailed. At a minimum, you've got however long that was of missed productivity that you've already lost. um, and so, yeah, I mean, that's been the way that Prodoscore has been used thus far, and is definitely the goal of Prodoscore as a tool. But Denise, talk a little bit about rolling that out at Bilo and addressing that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, with any organization, we tell them, oh, we're installing this tool and it can see everything you're doing all day long. There's that initial like, oh, wow, oh, but, I mean, that lasted maybe a few days, because they realized that this tool is really, again, compiling the data that already exists. But they almost saw it, some of the employees, like a competition, like, I'm going to get a better score than you, or I'm going to be, the top producer, this week, etc. And we've ran a couple of competitions internally, like whoever can maintain the highest score for, a month or 2 weeks or whatever it is, get a prize. But, now it's more of a guide. And I don't think anybody within my organization is scared of it. We didn't lose anyone because of it. It's just really helped improve productivity for us. And I think everybody sees it as that. It's almost like a reminder, like, hey, make sure you use CRM. Hey, make sure you use the VoIP system. Hey, make sure you're using, the company email for emails and communication. So again, it's been a great adoption tool for us. And we haven't seen any sort of, backlash or loss of employees or anything because of it. Because I think your top players will welcome a tool like this because it'll help them shine. I think the only people that would be scared of it are people who are actually not performing. They're not working, or if you do have a work from home policy, maybe they're taking advantage of that and they're not working. So
Great. All right, so we have a question. How do you make Prodoscore tailored for your company? So I can take this one. This is one of the biggest advantages of Prodoscore, and I can speak to this both, from the perspective of how great and easy it is to work with Prodoscore, but also as somebody who's administered and onboarded multiple productivity tracking slash gamification platforms over the years. And the great thing about Prodoscore is it's dead simple to get up and running on. So you just log in and set up Prodoscore with the different platforms that you use. So like your CRM, G Suite, VoIP system, conference calling system. So you just authenticate with those. And that allows Prodoscore to start then gathering in all of that data from all of those different sources. And then this is where the machine learning piece comes in is, with historical systems, like a gamification system or something like that, you've got two problems. One is they typically only plug into like one or a few platforms. So primarily like CRM or like a call center piece of software or something like that. And so you're siloed. And so you only have that one piece of what's going on in somebody's day. And typically it means that it's also only applicable for like certain departments or roles. Since Prodoscore plugs into all of the different things that people are using, then it's applicable across the entire company. But the bigger problem with those older platforms is you have to go in and manually configure all of your key performance indicators. And so you have to say, like, these are the things we want to track. These are the things that we want to report on. These are the weights that we want to give to certain activities. And so it's an extremely, extremely manual and labor intensive process to get up and running. And then it takes lots and lots of effort to try and tweak it and get it tailored right. Prodoscore, by using Google's machine learning, is able to pull in all of these different data points from all these different platforms, and it's then able to look at based off of the company, the department, the role, even down to the person's manager. What does productivity look like for somebody in that role at that company, under that manager? And so for some people that may be like they need to be on the phone all day long. For some people, that may be they're primarily replying to emails or they're primarily working within your CRM. But Prodoscore is able to distinguish between those and be able to say, like, this is what productivity should look like. And then by using that machine learning, it's able to just automatically spit out a single score. So you don't have to go through all of the manual configuration and all of that. The machine learning takes care of that piece of it. Do you see have anything to add on that side?
No, I think you're pretty thorough.
um, all right, we have a question. What would best practices be for employees with cell phones? Would it be better to eliminate it and have them switch to VoIP for tracking? So VoIP, like Vonage, works with your cell phone. So, Denise, I'll let you take this since
Yeah.
Viwo is actually a reseller of Vonage.
Yeah, and you definitely want to look for a VoIP system that has mobility features. For us, we use Vonage, and Vonage has a mobile app where they can make calls using the mobile app instead of their personal phone number. And at the same time, I'm able to collect the data from that mobile phone call because they're using that mobile app. So it hides their personal phone number and it always shows their business phone number, and it's the same as using a desk phone. So I would say look for a VoIP provider that has that mobility app feature.
Great. All right. I think that's all the questions we have. Give everybody one last chance to add any others that you have. Otherwise, we'll give you back 5 minutes of your day. All right. Well, Denise, thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks everybody for attending. Like I said, we'll get an email out to you shortly with links to both the deck and the recording. And yep, that's exactly
Thanks,
cool.
Jason.
Great. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll be in touch.